Good evening and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds. Tonight I'm going to be doing an analysis of a video. And this is a video which I've had for a long time, but for some reason I just failed to do an analysis on it, except perhaps with Volley 5. And so what I'm going to do is record precisely what I would do in analyzing any video. Now before we get started, I want to say that I'm going to be playing sounds from the video, and quite a few of them, and for those of you who were actually there, this may be a little disturbing to hear these gunshot sounds again, so I just wanted to say that up front. The picture here is just a picture out of one of my notebooks where I was trying to write a vector representation of how to calculate lag, simply because the video itself is kind of disturbing to watch. Alright, so which video are we talking about? It is this one right there. The video starts off with a woman on her back and people attempting to aid her in her dilemma. It is on the east side of the venue, directly in the line of fire, and it's very well positioned for many things. And I ran across this video on a hard drive because I was looking for citizen phone recordings of the last two shots, and so I was just clicking through all these things from the Vegas shooting map and found this and said, hey, I don't remember having that, so I went and looked and found it, and I realized that I had not entered the information from this video into my database. And as you can see, this video covers 6 of the shots from the 308 that occurred between volleys 4 and 5, as well as volleys 5 through 10. Alright, so let's get started. First off, I gotta close that. Alright, what I would do is, after having downloaded the video, I would open up Sonic Visualizer, my favorite tool for doing this type of stuff, and then open the file. And in this case, I think I already have it stored in the URL stored in my clipboard. Oh. And then I would open up the MP4. And Sonic Visualizer has no trouble opening these files directly. Sometimes I need to convert it to WAV or MP3 to do other things, but normally it can just open them up directly. And so here we have it. Alright, these default panes I'm sure you've looked at are what I've programmed Sonic Visualizer to do, and if you were to run Sonic Visualizer you could program it to display by default any panes that you wanted. And this setup has a power spectrogram on the top, log frequency in the middle, and the waveform on the bottom. And each one of them is good for a specific purpose. So the first thing I would do is look at the bottom down here and see that this is a relatively short video. And you can see right where the density of the sounds is great. Those are most likely volleys. And we can see over here that here's a couple of short ones, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and they have fairly good signal to noise ratio. And we see the things prior to volley 5, which is that big period where the single shots were fired, is not such great signal to noise ratio. So the first thing I do is click on the spectrogram profile tab here, and then I would delete this little tab. Alright, and then basically I'll adjust the gain to where I can see stuff on each of them, and then I would start recording or marking down the things that I see. So some of these volleys I recognize just by the shape of them. So first I'd start with volley 5 right there, I'm pretty sure. There we go. So there's volley 5, 3 bursts. So on this top tab I would add a new, or top pane, I would add a new layer that for text, and by default it opens up there, and I can add little text, and so I'd put there. Did I not click? Either I'm brain dead or something weird is going on here. Oh yeah, the tab was added in the wrong place. Dumb me. It has added onto the bottom one. Let's delete that. Make sure I've got this part clicked, the little left hand side over there, and re-add it. Layer, text. Things don't always go too well. Okay, so this would be volley 5. What I'm doing is just adding a text annotation there as I go, just so that I can see things easily. And I'll show you the purpose of that later. And then I would just scroll through here, looking for things of value. And I know there's a up and down line, which might indicate a shot. But I'm picking the low-hanging fruit, so I'm picking off the major volleys. So this is 6A. Okay. 6B. Keep going. Looking for things that some. Okay. Alright, yeah, here's volley 7, and it starts somewhere over in here. Seven. 8. There's 8. 8 has 2 pieces, so this is going to be. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, this looks like 9. Oh, this is 9. What did I do? Get things confused here, or I bypassed 8. Yeah, that's 9. 5, 6, 7. No, that's 8. That was 8. I was right. So even though I've done this a long time, it's easy to get lost and confused, and that's why I put these little markers in there. Okay, there's all of the 8B. Okay. And as I go by here, I notice that there's a lot of intensity in the lower frequency there for the muzzle blasts. Okay. Let me go move over to 9. There's another up and down shot of interest. I don't know, I just mark that while I'm going. For future reference, I just put a couple question marks on it, so that I'll note that it was there. Alright. And I might get lazy at the moment, so that I don't spend your entire time marking things. 9. Because volley 9 consists of 3 pieces. That's too wide to be a gunshot. Okay. And finally there's 10. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's interesting in the fact that down here, once again, we see that the upper part starts out very, very strong with the supersonic crack, and then there's some really loud noises here on the lower frequencies that are atypical for what would be the muzzle blasts. So if we expand this open, zoom in to the timing, we see that those loud sounds correspond with the supersonic crack. So that's going to be some interesting stuff there. So let's go ahead and put a little text note there. And I could, add another text layer, but let's just put it up on the top one up here. Let's say possible soft body hits. And I say that because if we zoom in real close, you'll see that there's these very large waves, which mean that the frequency of that is very low, which would occur, unlike this one, for example, which is kind of high, would occur on a large body that resonates at a low frequency. Alright, so having marked off all the volleys, what I can do is click on that tab, hit the E for edit, and then if I want to get to someplace quick, like volley 7, I just click it, and poof, I'm at volley 7, volley 5. So this is, shortcuts, or bookmarks for PDF. Just allows you to get around a little bit easier. Alright, so we got the major volleys marked. Got some interesting points. So now I start looking for those single shots. And that's a little harder, so what I do is make that bigger, so I get a better handle on it. And as you can see, there's all sorts of up and down lines, which are percussive sounds. So let's just take a look and see. Alright, I picked the biggest ones first. So there's some big ones right there. Narrow and bright. So if I play them, I'll probably get a good idea what they are. So what I'm going to do is select the spectrogram. I'm going to select my selection tool, and then I'm going to select that region, and then I'm going to play back. And we heard something there, but it doesn't quite sound like a gunshot. Could be, but who knows. So let's expand our region out some and play that whole thing again.
Hey, we need. Hey, we need.
Yeah, they sound more like people walking on something, or metal or something like that. So right off the top, I would ignore those for the moment and just keep on looking for a gunshot. That kind of sounds like one. So I'd mark that. Again, in this case, I'm looking, and then I just play things. That was something going on right in there, as we heard a sound. Okay. So what I'll do is just go back a ways and play it, listening for those.
What's happening, sir? Can you see? Hey, we need.
Okay, well, I'm not picking up a lot of stuff, so what I'll do is hop back over to the thing here and see what somebody else has done. So it's 7, 16, and 26. 7, 16, and 26. Alright, let's go to 7, which is obviously right at the start. I didn't start back far enough is what I didn't do. So let's see, 4, 5. Right in there somewhere, huh? Right there, okay. something there. Oops. Seven, 16, and 26. All right. Right there. Okay. 32, 39, 32, 39. Huh? Now they picked up 32. Now they picked up 39, but it's a little off there, so I'll move it over. Oh, for some reason, those sounded okay. And then 47.
Where did it go? Are the cops come yet? What's happening, sir? Can you see?
Hey, we need...
Well, who knows? In this case, he thought there was a shot there, so shot right there. I'm going to put these others as things to look at. As you can see, it's always not definitive. And all right. So now, having marked out, roughly speaking, the single shots and the volleys involved here, I better save this session so that I can come back to it at any time. Do that, and we'll just save to the desktop under new stuff. Now let's give it a name. Let's call it laying down, since everybody's laying down on the ground. So now I've got a session saved that I can come back to at any time. All right. So I've marked out the major volleys. I believe I've located some single shots, and you know, in the overall scheme, going back and forth and looking at these things several times, it takes about an hour for every 2 or 3 minutes of audio to listen to if it's straightforward. Sometimes as much as an hour per 5 seconds. So this audio, before I'm completely done with it, will take about 10 to 20 hours to look at and document and measure and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to try to condense that all into an hour or two this evening. So the next thing I'm always interested in is what's the lag. Those single shots aren't clear enough with their muzzle blast. So let's go directly to volley 5. And if you'll notice here, and as you can see, I zoom in now, and there's something that, you know, you might think is a gunshot sound, and I could look at it in detail, but just from experience I know that it's not bright enough. And if that were something that was even remotely like a gunshot sound, I'd open it way up and look at it very carefully. A lot of times what I'll do is just mark these things, and I'll mark them with the question marks, and then when I export them to my software that I've built, it'll take a look at all the question mark locations, look around it for about a second or two, and try to determine automatically for me whether or not that's a viable candidate for a single shot or a volley or whatever. And that's semi-automated process. It's not, you know, it still requires human intervention by a long shot, and all the software really can do is give me a probable indication of where to look. But it saves me a lot of time because it'll rule out a lot of things that, you know, I initially think are gunshots. All right, so here we have, let's see which burst. This is one of the bursts. This is the second burst. All right, let's look at this. So in this case, on the power side up here, we see very bright and very clear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spikes, which go all the way up to the 16,000 hertz and extend down. Oh, actually, that's not true. They only go up to the square root of that. Power, you know, the frequency scale over here is off because the power spectrogram basically takes the signal and multiplies it by itself, which throws the frequencies way off. And a lot of times I just mistakenly say, oh yeah, but then I remember that. And so really it caps out about 8,000, which is still pretty high. And then the bottom of it is about 1,000. That's what I would expect for a supersonic crack. And then you'll notice that these other sounds, which we know, by now, I know what this stuff looks like. These are going to be the muzzle blasts down there. And they peak out at a couple thousand and go all the way down. And then I look at the count of them. There's, what they say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. Okay, so I got a good viable and strong candidate here to measure the lag with. So I pull out my measuring tool, expand it out a little so I can get a closer idea. And then I start at the first supersonic crack, and I expand over to the first muzzle blast, because this muzzle blast is produced at the same time that the bullet leaves the gun for this supersonic crack. And you've got to remember that supersonic cracks, because they're produced by the bullet, which is traveling faster than the speed of sound, are always heard first. So in this case we got 0.387. Alright, let's write that down. So 0.387 up there on the first one, and then I'll repeat the process for the tail end, which, let's see, and it's about 0.399 or about 0.40. Okay, so go over here and put in 0.40. Okay, and it's just a matter of choice where I'd put that. Maybe over there, doesn't matter. So we have now on this volley the lag measured, and we know what the position is. And if I were to go over and look at, I think I still have that up there somewhere. Oh yeah, there we go. My lag plot. Okay, then it would have to be orange or deeper orange. And let's see, the sound booth is there. So this is somewhere in there. So that kind of jives with what the average measurements are for lag across the entire venue for the 223 rounds. So I'm feeling comfortable that the location of the video and the lag on it for volley 5 coincides with previously measured lag. So I'm feeling good about that. Alright, so back over to Sonic Visualizer, and both the supersonic cracks and the muzzle are clear and present. The number of them jive. So this audio for this volley is fairly clean and easy to work with. Now, what we can see up here on the power spectrogram on the top pane is that I have this on a linear scale for the frequency, or well, pseudo frequency over here, and that the energy of the muzzle blasts are these littler blips, and which are confined to a much narrower region than the energy for the supersonic cracks. And that's pretty typical of when the greater the signal, the more broadband it is. So in this case, the bullet is close enough that it records a fairly large broadband signal for the supersonic crack. And for the muzzle blast, we see that it's pretty intense compared to the supersonic crack, which at that distance and the fact that the bullet path is relatively close, I would have expected just the opposite. So at this point, I'm going to listen to it by selecting it. And once again, warning here is that if you're traumatized by listening to the shots, you might want to mute or skip this section. But let's go ahead and listen to it. Yeah, the muzzle blast, a little bit louder, and the supersonic cracks sound a little tinny and not real close, but yet we know they are close. So I'd have to think that somehow the microphone is probably not pointed directly at the shooter's location or at the trajectory of the bullet in this case. Now, if we listen to just the muzzle blast without any supersonic crack, you can hear that they are kind of lower frequency thud, thump, thud, 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 thud type sounds. And if we listen to just the supersonic crack without any muzzle blast, see, then they sound a much higher frequency than the muzzle blast. And that's how you know which phenomena you're dealing with, is that for many of the recordings that are within the reasonable distance of the trajectory of the bullet and reasonable distance from the shooting location, you have a fairly clear signal, and the frequencies are very distinct. So this volley jives with, except for the intensity volumes, jives with everything I understand about gunshot acoustics. It's appropriate for the location. The bullet path, while not right on top of this location, was certainly close enough to warrant some concern. As to what all these other sounds are, I don't know. Let's just select one and see if we can make anything of it. No. It's pretty much just drowned out by the background sound. So I'll take that down. Now. Alright. So at this point, this particular volley then would be measured. And the way I do measurement is I have to pick one of these panes to record the information. So I'll pick the the log frequency one, and I'll add an instance layer, time instance. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is put marks at every muzzle blast. And I'm just going to slap them down quick, and then I'll come back and make them more accurate. So at every muzzle blast, I'm going to record that, and I'm going to turn them red. Okay, and then I'll mark the first one, give it a name. The first muzzle blast of every volley or burst is the name. My convention is the name of that volley. So in this case, see, this was the second one, so they go EFG, so 5E. And my program, seeing that, will take this named thing and associate all these new points with that name. And then I can, do all sorts of calculations. Now then what I would do is I place down the markers just sort of haphazardly, is I'll come back and I'll try to do a better job of aligning them. So what I'll do is I'll take the scale of this spectrogram down to something more definitive. And you see, this is a tough one because it's right there close to the, so let's start at the tail end, make it a little easier. when the supersonic crack and the muzzle blast are close together, it's it's a little tougher to mark them. All right. So here we are. We're looking down here at the at the waveform, and I've got to determine where I'm going to say that the signal begins. And the most important thing is to do it consistently for every shot. Don't pick the peak for one and the valley for the next. So in this case, oh my goodness, I'm going to pick the first spot that represents a finite signal that's the biggest and narrowest. There we go. Alright. So we move up backward to the next one. Do the same thing. No, I'm going to call it that one. And so I do that for every one of these, which gets them, within a microsecond of a millisecond of when the signal actually occurs. Okay, now that one's a little different because it's got a lot of background noise in it, but I believe that it starts right there. And if we further reduce the scale granularity on this, go all the way down to 32 samples per window, probably get a little bit more accuracy out of it. Not anymore on that one. Alright, got one more to do. Now this one's kind of tough. But it needs to come over to the right some, obviously. Get into at least the start of the signal. Alright. So, then I'll take a look at the width of the actual thing itself. And that one's not a very good candidate. As you can see, there's, sound all along there, but they're not associated. And here there's multiple peaks. So let's pick the second point and see what we can measure. Alright, measuring tool. Start on that. And go from there to there. And we end up with 3.7. It's a little long for a muzzle blast, but it'll work. And let's go over now to the sonics and look at them. The first one is generally the better representation because there's not as much noise surrounding it. And so we look at the width of this first signal, and it's 0.566 or maybe 0.6 milliseconds, which is about right. The ratio of the widths of the supersonic crack to the muzzle blast at any reasonable distances is about 2 or 3 to 1, sometimes as high as 4 to 1. So all that looks good. Alright, and then I would take that layer, that instance layer, after I'd filled it in for each volley, each shot, each single shot, each burst through the entire thing, and I'd export it to a file. I then would read that file into my program, and I could then produce graphs and compare it against all the other measurements. So this audio, when I'm done, will have 1 point for every muzzle shot, 1 point at least for every single shot. And for this one, let's see, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times roughly 100, 500. So it's going to have on the order of 600 entries that get stuck into the database. So you can see that even with just 10 videos, that's quite a number of data points. And the database is at 10,000 right now and growing. By the time when I'm done with this one, it'll be another 500 or 600 points in there. All right. So tonight I'm not going to do every one because that just takes too long. So what we've done so far is you can see out of what the supersonic crack looks like. You can see what the muzzle blast looks like, and you can see roughly how I go about identifying them. In this case, it's fairly straightforward. This is a good quality signal audio with good signal to noise ratio, not a lot of interference or overlaps from other things during the time that the gunshots occur. And it would take me about an hour or two to finish marking crudely all the spots, and then another hour or two to refine them to where they're fairly accurate. So about 3-4 hours to enter all those points into it. But I'll wrap that up later. What I want to do now is look for interesting things. And if we up here on the power diagram, if we change the scale of the y-axis to log, what it does is emphasize the lower frequency things, and you can sometimes see more information. Also about this time now, besides passing gas, I would add in a spectral contrast so I could see what the contrast of the frequencies looks like. So I go up here at transform spectral mean, so I'm going to do a spectral mean contrast, and what that's going to do is go along and measure the mean frequency at every window, and I can specify the window size here. It just depends. I typically go with 512 and then a slide of half that, so they'll get a lot of overlapping windows, and these take a while to compute, and you can see it on the lower left hand side here. But they're another confirmation that when I've selected these points that they're in the right spot. And while it's doing that, oh wait, it's starting to do it now. So anyway, over here I go and adjust the bottom to log, because it gives me a little bit better idea on the bottom, and then I up the amplitude, and here you can see things start to come into focus. And you can see that, yes, if I put my thing back up there, let's go find the one I marked. Let's see, it was prior to this. It was prior to this. I should be speaking louder. Here we go. Alright, so open it up wider by zooming in and amplitude up a little. Okay, then I'm gonna, do I have an invert on this? Oh, don't have an invert on that. Oh well. So we just manually do it. Yes, 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 yes. So you can see that this gives me an idea of confirmation that I've selected the right points. Alright, so all that looks good. So let's take and look at some of the individual volleys, or let's look at the volleys generally, so we can get an idea of what's happening for the volleys across the entire video. So let's jump over to this next one and lower this back down to the linear scale on the y-axis and shrink them up. Let's see, what scale am I working with here? 32 is way too. 512 is about the window size that I use typically to look at things, and then I adjust it to where I have, alright, some good ratio between the darkness and the lightness. So this being volley 6, what we can see is that these upper regions, which are the supersonic cracks, aren't real brilliant, and that there's more energy in the muzzle blast as indicated by the red at a frequency of approximately 346 Hertz, which should be the quote-unquote center frequency, which for a 223 is a little low. It should be more up there in the 500 or 600 Hertz range, but that's okay. But then we see something odd. We see some heavy intensity down here. So, and up here we see, on the power scale, we see a gap that kind of looks unusual. So then I need to take a look at that. So let's take a look at that, because it potentially represents something different. Alright, so then I would look at it. The first thing I would do is highlight it there and play it back. Okay, so we got some very loud thuds. So now the question becomes, what's this sound, and what is the cause of it, and why is it so loud, and why is it so distinct? So if we expand these stuff open a little bit more, and we start looking, and we see that this signal right there, which looks like a supersonic crack, appears to be out of place. Okay, and we see that the muzzle blast, which is this little bitty dot, right, these little bitty dots, is pretty low intensity compared to the cracks. But these loud sounds coincide precisely with the supersonic crack. Alright? Now, a supersonic crack is a very narrow, less than 1 millisecond phenomena. So let's see by looking at the there we go. And let's turn off the spectral contrast back there a moment. Well, let's leave it on to make prove useful. So let's expand this out and see what we can see. So for any one of those, then, what we see. I need to turn the contrast tab off. Okay. So if we look at one cycle of whatever that is, and let's not take the long part, let's take from here to there, because that's one cycle. We have something that's on the order of 3.4 milliseconds, which that's in the range of the muzzle blast. So you say, how can a muzzle blast occur at the same time as the supersonic crack? And it can't unless you're essentially either close to the gun or at an extreme distance from the bullet path. But for us to be at an extreme distance from the bullet path, then all of these muzzle things up there. So we rule out the fact that it's a muzzle. So then that only leaves one option, and that option is that this supersonic crack, which occurs right there, which is about 0.7 milliseconds in duration, is immediately followed by a dumping of energy from the bullet which hit something into a body which is fairly large because the frequency is fairly low. In fact, if we were to measure the frequency, we'd see that in the center of it, it's down in the 150 hertz range with a peak of about 400. So my first estimate would be that these are all hits on a soft target. A soft target being something like a watermelon or a board or a person or something along that nature. So, are they all looking the same? Let's look here. Yeah, they all look the same. And then let's see, let's make sure that this one, which doesn't have as much intensity, is different. And it kind of looks the same, and it kind of looks different. So maybe the bullet hit something there, but it was a little bit further away. Next one, a little bit the same. A little bit the same. A little bit the same. So what didn't hit something? How about this one? Did it hit something? And we can see that there's no wiggle to it in terms of up and down stuff. So if it hit something, it was higher frequency. It was a hard body, so it may have hit something, and this probably is the bullet hitting a harder surface. But since it occurs almost at the same time as the supersonic crack, not much we can do to separate it and determine what was actually hit. So I would note then on my notes tab up there that possible soft body hits. And then over here I would say possible hard body hits. And what I would do then is I would locate another video nearby and look at the same time frame, and since it's a different position, I would look at the relative intensity of them and confirm that it was in fact something isolated to this video or in a small region, and then proceed from there. But before we moved on to anything else, let's take a look at that one signal there that looked out of place. Alright, so let's go ahead and isolate it. Okay. And then play it back. Kind of sounds like a supersonic crack. Right? I mean, what's a supersonic crack sound like? It sounds like, well, this one over here is going to be different because it has that hit underneath it. Yeah. Let's find one that doesn't have such a strong component to it. Here's one of these will do. Kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? Okay. Let's go back and look at it more carefully. Okay, well, if we look real close at it, we see that there's no definitive begin and end to it, that all the signals are roughly of the same frequency and height. So let's look at a different supersonic crack that doesn't have that low frequency component. Here's one. And we can see that it has a distinct signal there, which probably with the reflection there followed by that noise, which is not the same as what we see over there. So what else do we observe? What's the frequency of it? Well, it's got a little bit more intensity than these adjoining ones. Certainly more intensity than some of those. If we expand it out, we can see that it looks different. So at that point then I'm going to tentatively call it a hard strike. Hard strike meaning that it was probably a bullet passing through something. And now which bullet was it? I don't know. Now I could have these reversed. It could be that this is the supersonic crack. I don't think so. And this is the strike. And I'd have to do a careful analysis of the timing of all this to figure it out. Alright. So this is volley 6. And let's go back on the larger scale. And so we look at it. Okay. And did we measure the lag? No, I haven't measured the lag yet. So let's expand it out so we can measure the lag. And wow. Alright. So in this case I measure from the last strong signal up there to the last one right there, and we get 0.392. Alright. And what's the head of this one say? That's the tail lag. Okay, whoa, a lot larger. So from the head of the first supersonic crack, come on now, to the first muzzle is 0.412, 412, 412. Okay. Point 412. No, 412, not 21. All right. Great. So I measure the lag. I'm not going to count up the bullets. While I'm here, I'll probably just listen to this and see what I could determine from this signal. Well, it's not a clear, crisp sound like most of the bullets, so I'm not sure what produced it, so I'm just going to mark it as a unknown. Alright, that's enough on that one. The thing that we generally observe here is that for the most part on volley 6A and 6B, and with the exception of these loud things down here, which I believe might be actual bullet striking, the supersonic crack on the upper part and the muzzle are all fairly consistent in ratio in terms of intensity. And that's what I would expect if the recording position is not moving and the camera is always facing roughly the same direction. So let's move on to the next volley, which would be 7. Nope, that's 8. Or 7. There's volley 7. Volley 7's way different phenomena. In the middle of volley 7, we see that we have these strong supersonic cracks. I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, about 15 or 16 of them with something strange in the middle that are really intense. And otherwise, we have regions where the muzzle blasts are intense on the right side and on the left side, but in the middle here, the muzzle blasts are not intense when the supersonic cracks are. And so to me, this indicates that the gun was not pointed real close to it, and the bullets were, when this volley starts, the gun was not pointed in the direction of this camera, but then it approached it and started getting fairly close, and then it moved away from it again. And I can't tell just from this alone which way, but when I compare this to the other videos that are recorded, I can determine that it started north of this and came towards this and then probably continued to go downward towards the stage more. Okay, now do we see any hits or anything? Well, there's some pretty loud sounds over here. Let's take a listen and see. And it's got a lot of vocals in the background, so I'm not expecting a lot. But the important thing is that the intensity here continues to grow with the muzzle blast. Which, if the intensity is growing with the muzzle blast, implying that the gun was pointed more towards it, why aren't the supersonic cracks? Well, the supersonic cracks could be going over. They could have stopped earlier. Or the camera could be facing the shooter, but the bullet going either left or right of the target, the camera would not be facing. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's one possible explanation. I can't be for sure certain which yet, but okay. All right. So, is there anything else I want to observe about this volley? Well, can I measure the lag? Wow, that's going to take some work. Let's take a look here. Let's bring back the spectral contrast layer. Yeah, it's not too much even if I smooth it out. No, it's not much help. I always look at the head and the tail. See, I won't be able to measure lag very easily here because even though I have a identifiable muzzle blast, I don't know which muzzle blast these supersonic cracks are associated with, because the lag could be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So let's go to the tail end and see if we can't. I'll ramp up the amplification on this. Maybe I can locate the supersonic cracks. Nope. Alright, so we have a inability on this volley at this site to determine precisely what the lag is. Now, that brings up an interesting subject. Why can't I simply take the distance between these supersonic cracks and match them to the lags? And I can't do that because the supersonic cracks do not preserve the spacing between shots. The supersonic cracks, distance between them vary by how close the bullet is coming to the recording location, whereas the muzzle blasts do not. They accurately represent the time in between each round. That is, when the round is fired, the gas comes out of the barrel, and that sound from one round to the next preserves the timing between the rounds. Whereas with the supersonic cracks, the arrival time of the supersonic cracks depends upon the bullet trajectory, which varies for each round. So you have to be very careful when you want to do measurements using the supersonic crack that you account for that variance. And for this particular venue, the lag can range from 22 milliseconds to 600 milliseconds. Now, within one volley it's going to be fairly consistent, but in one of the volleys coming up we'll find something rather unique that'll be interesting. Alright, so anyway, that's volley 7. Is there anything I could do? Yeah, lots more, but let's go to the next one. So now we're on to volley 8. Okay. So here we have supersonic cracks and muzzle blasts being fairly strong equally. We see some heavy lower frequency sounds in here corresponding once again to the supersonic crack, which indicates that there was probably bullets hitting nearby or hitting objects. And again, we'd have to go through the same analysis that we did prior. In fact, a lot of bullets hitting here. In fact, wow, a lot of bullets striking around this recording for this volley. All right. Now there's something interesting. And there too is something interesting. Okay, and I can't quite get too good a picture of where the last muzzle is compared to, okay, but let's go to the second part of it. Head's a little messy. There's something that you don't see too often with this, is this fuzziness. So if we go up here, we select that fuzziness for 2 supersonic cracks, and we play it. You can hear the supersonic cracks, but you also hear some things in the background. And basically this is a smear, as I call it, a smear, in the sounds because they're echoing off stuff. So this is a high frequency echo of the supersonic crack. I don't know what's going on in the video, but that would indicate that there's some hard reflecting surface very close by that sound is hitting and coming back to the camera on, in addition to the primary signal. And as to why it's changing, that would mean that the camera position relative to that hard surface is changing. So it could be that the camera's pointing at the ground and it receives the supersonic crack and then immediately receives a rather blurred echo. But then the bigger the smear, the greater the reverberation echo, or the number of surfaces that it's reflecting off of. So for example, inside the Mario food truck, basically this type of signal isn't even possible because there's so much blur that it dominates the primary signal. Alright, so back to trying to measure lag. Right about in there looks to be the last supersonic crack, muzzle. You know, sometimes it's hard to distinguish when you have a loud supersonic crack that gets echoed off of something, exactly when it occurs versus when the muzzle occurs. So let's just make a rough guess here. This is a rough guess of about 0.359. I'm not even going to write it down because it's such a rough guess. So let's see what 0.359 would get us on the front. Because you see, it looks like there's little muzzles down there. Let's see which is the strongest for... Yeah, I don't know. I just can't tell on that one. Well, we can see that some of these sounds are getting really close. Alright, that's 8. So let's talk about it overall. Overall, the supersonic crack and the muzzles are occurring about in equal intensities, but it does change. It's halfway through. We can't say whether the cause is the bullets themselves or whether it's the position of the camera relative to the sound. So this would be marked as needing a lot more analysis to make any real statement on it. So we're just guessing right now to the point, speculating. Okay, so now we're at volley 10. Volley 10, and it's always a problem. Always, always, always a problem. And I've yet to, give it enough time to know why. But it shows some of the same phenomena. We have really strong low frequency here, really strong low frequency there, fairly consistent strength there, fairly consistent strength across the top. For the supersonic cracks, we have, it looks like a measurable lag of about, I guess it's easier to measure up there. So from the last supersonic to there's about 0.34. So we could go ahead and write that one in. Alright, this is what is it over here. 0.352, okay. Okay. So volley 10 is, not quite as close, I would say, as some of the other ones. Is that volley 10? Is that volley 10, he says. No, that's volley 9. Oh, okay. Not volley 10, volley 9. Now, the start of volley 9, namely this region right here, is different. Let's take a listen. Yeah, that's what I thought. You notice these are low frequency sounds, which are muzzle blast. So I would say that the path of the bullet on this is substantially different than the path of the bullet for these remaining things. So let's go ahead and take a note up here that says, this is Vol 9A. Let's see, verse 9A, missing crack, meaning that it's dominant. There's only muzzle blast there, for whatever reasons. Okay, so then let's go over to 10. Okay, and there's some pretty interesting things again going on up front here. Let's listen to these, obviously just supersonic cracks. And we hear that they're really close together. Are they hitting anything? I don't think so. Let's look closer. Oh, they're smeared. Alright, well, let's look at the signal there for each one. And now you can begin to see the effect of echo and reverberation, where you would have one strong, instead of just one strong signal at the start and then going to silence, it amplifies itself, and it's hard to tell what's going on in this segment following the initial signal. So the initial signal is, let's mark it, is right there. And then it gets reflected and echoed off something and recorded repeated times in a altered fashion, and it does decay. You know, it ramps up a little bit, then decays down, and we do see some lower frequency component in there. Something comes along, and it's hard to say what that low frequency sound is because it occurs along there, unrelated to gunshot activity. But as you can see on this scale, how the signal for the echo and reverberation ramps down exponentially. And that's pretty typical of, you know, signals which are secondary in nature and are caused by a naturally occurring phenomena where you hit something or echo something, and it just the sound dies off over time in an exponential fashion. Alright. These dark regions up here on the power scale bother me also. Why there would be a lack of signal there would mean that there have to be something absorbing those frequencies. So why would that absorption be different from shot to shot in terms of what frequencies it absorbs? I don't know. Let's put a note in there and say why absorption frequency diff. This could be an artifact of the way the phone does it. You know, these phones or cameras, they're constantly adjusting the frequency and the amplitude to get the best overall audio. And it could be that it's adjusting that the base frequency of that of a filter in there, and in doing so is moving that region of absorption. Now that seems weird. There's a big dark region. Let's amplify it all the way up. See if there's anything comes to mind here. No. I cannot tell you why it's dark there, because this looks like a place where the camera tried adjusting the gain up, to capture more background sound. In other words, this loud sound caused the camera to adjust the gain down so it could record loud sounds, and then a few milliseconds later it decided to go ahead and adjust the gain back up so it could record the background sound, since there hadn't been a loud sound for a few milliseconds. Don't know. It would take further investigation, as I would like to say. Okay, so that's the volleys generally. I'm going to cover the single shots briefly, and then we'll wrap this video up. And so what you've seen tonight is precisely how I look at a video on first blush. I get some times down, I make some notes and observations, and then I'll come in at a later time, complete the process, refine it, and feed it through my program, and then I'll take the information garnered from this video, compare it to all the surrounding ones and the times generally, and start to come to some conclusions about what was happening at that location, and or maybe what was happening about some other locations. So let's jump back all the way over to, actually we can just do it like this. Then we have these shots recorded. That's why I do that, is so I can go to any one of these and start looking. Alright. Let's go to the first one. And what does we have? Okay. Now, first off, let's take the gain back down and get over here to the spectral contrast. Nah, it doesn't tell us much. That looks more like this shot than this does. That kind of looks more like it than this. Alright. So what I'm saying here is that this is hard to identify, which is no surprise. Single shots are always hard to identify. Well, let's play it and see where we hear it. Okay, I was right. It's on the right. So, let's move our marker then, or our tag. Well, what the hell am I doing now? Okay. Okay, that to me sounds like a thud. So let's just go ahead and mark it as a thud. Now, what can we say about anything of this shot? Can't really say that that's a crack. Can't really say that it's a muzzle. Now let's listen to the other stuff around there.
Just hold on to her. Hold on to her. Hold on to her. Is everyone getting it?
No, that's it, baby, right there. Alright. Let's bring it into log scale. Let's lower the amplitude. So, alright, we can see that it's the only real narrow and clear and narrow signal right there. And then let's do 8 times oversampling. Nothing on the lower end. Alright. Okay. Let's look at a frequency. What I just did was change the window size to emphasize frequency over location. And so here we can see that it's definitely unique to the other sounds surrounding it, and that those other peaks were probably caused by vocalizations. because you see on this scale, all we see is harmonic signals, with the only non-harmonic being that spot right there that we've marked as the shot. Alright, now let's just leave it on this scale and see what else we can discover. As you can tell, sometimes it takes a little playing around with all the settings to get the best view of a signal. Okay, here we have a couple things coming up, and immediately we see that it's misplaced a little bit. More like right there. I placed the tag ahead of it so that when I bookmark to it, I can see both left and right of it. Well, right off the bat we see that these signals are not very strong compared to the background. So it's unlikely that we're going to get any good measurements of lag or anything like that. Even locating them is a little problematic. Okay, there we see the next one. Could be moved over just a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that definitely looks like one. Play over it. Thud. Okay. Alright, just keep going along here. Yep, that's definitely a shot. Only that time it sounds like a crack. So let's go ahead and... No, I'd have to go back and do them all. Okay. And you see what on one scale might look like a gunshot actually is just a vocal spike of some kind.
What's happening, sir? Can you see? Hey!
Okay. So now we come to these things. Based upon the previous signal of the shots, that does not look like a shot. It looks like a percussive sound being generated by another thing, almost like, I don't know, a door or gate or something.
Hey, we need...
And a similar thing there. Golly, once again it's hard to tell here. So I'm going to downgrade this one to a shot, maybe. And right now I'm just trying to locate the up and down, all the up and down things. And then I'll get to... There's a dark region, I'm not sure. Oh, I thought I heard something. Just my imagination. Okay, now we're at the sixth bend and we're going to get the shot. So, alright. So, been working on this a while, so I better save the session. Alright. So that'll be the first blush analysis. As you can see, the single shots are a little bit problematic in terms of verifying their locations. The volleys were all fairly clear. We identified... Oh yeah, before I move on, let's go ahead and mark out the six booms. The volleys were all fairly clear and unique. Lag could be measured on 2/3 of them. We identified hits, both of hard body and soft body. We identified the fact that the intensity and ratios of the signals for supersonic and muzzle were in some instances spot on, as the theory would indicate, but in some instances wasn't, indicating that there may be some directionality of the phone, meaning it might be oriented in a direction that is, sensitive to the location of the trajectory of the bullet versus the location of the shooter. We noticed that the lag is where we can measure it is consistent with the lag that we've measured from other videos. And there are probably some other signals in here that I haven't noted, because I noted between some of these that there were things that didn't quite look right. While I'm on this scale, let me just briefly go through these. No. Yeah, I don't know what that one is, or whether I've looked at it, but usually they end up being not gunshots, but better to play it safe. Oh, what do we have there? I don't know, but we better. It's always interesting when I see pairs of things that start with a spike on the left at a higher frequency, and then this thing, which I believe to be a non-gunshot sound, but I'm gonna review it. And that's the end of that. Okay, so we're done. Well, I hope by you watching as I look at one of these videos, it helps to understand the nature of how I do this analysis, what can be gained, what can't be gained, sometimes how difficult it is to isolate this stuff, sometimes how easy it is. And this is an audio that's fairly clear by comparison to some of them. So anyway, that's it for this show. We'll grab you in the next one.